Hi, I'm Matt Evans, Superintendent of the Monticello Central School District, and thank you for joining me for the May 22nd, 2023 edition of It's Monday in Monticello. Before I get to our special guests this week, I want to just update the community on some different things. First, last week we had our annual budget vote and Board of Education election, and I want to thank all of our voters for their support in that vote and election. Our budget passed with 77% of our voters voting yes for that budget. I also want to congratulate Adriana Mason-Greco and Wendy Galligan-Weiner for their re-election to the Board of Education. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, May 23rd, the Board of Education will be holding a special meeting to canvass 8 affidavit ballots. Those affidavit ballots will help determine the outcome of the remaining Board of Education member seat currently held by Helen Jersey. She and Mary Beth Bastone are running for that seat, and they are separated by 5 votes. So those 8 affidavit ballots will be canvassed at this special meeting. Once they are accounted for, the Board of Education will then act to certify the results. So again, thank you everyone for voting in last week's election and budget vote. A reminder, we'll be closed next Monday, May 29th, in observance of Memorial Day. The next It's Monday in Monticello will be on Monday, June 5th. And we have a couple special events this week. On Wednesday, May 24th, the National Junior Honor Society will hold its annual induction ceremony at 6:30 p.m. in the Hughes Auditorium in Monticello High School. And our dance students will be given their spring performance on Thursday, May 25th, again at 6:30 p.m. in the Hughes Auditorium. So please come out for those special events. So this week I'm joined by Mr. Danzer, high school social studies teacher, Geliana Fernandez and Preston Roosa, who are his students. They competed this past spring in the state National History Day competitions, and I just wanted to ask them about their experiences, and then at the end of this video we'll feature Geliana's documentary, which took first place for documentary, and it's about the Homestead Strike. So first, Mr. Danzer, what is National History Day, and why did you form this club or activity for our students?
National History Day is a year-long nationwide competition that is participated in by some 600,000 students nationwide. It's primarily a research competition where students do primary research about a topic that is related to a general theme. This year's theme was Frontiers in History, and both Geliana and Preston, as well as many of my other students, chose amazing topics and did a really great job. I feel like National History Day, bringing it into the classroom, is a way to challenge students and allow them to showcase their talents and compare their work to the work of their peers across the state and across the country.
Wonderful. Thank you for putting it together. And we had a number of students who participated, and there's different, some of research papers.
There's 5 categories.
Okay.
5 categories. There's a paper. These two did documentaries. You could do write a paper, build a physical exhibit, do a live performance, which is always my favorite, or you could build a website. We had a lot of websites this year.
Great, wonderful. Now, Preston and Geliana, you both did documentaries. Preston, tell us about your documentary and why did you pick it?
Well, I decided to do the early history of Pixar, like going from back when it was just a small college group, and then eventually going to a big company producing many big movies. And I decided to pick it because Frontiers of History, they were the first to create a whole feature-length film, which was major back then, like no one has ever seen it. And I also kind of like computers and all of that, so I decided to do something along there. I thought Pixar would be good.
Great, thank you. And Geliana?
I did the Homestead Strike, and I chose it because I'm really interested in labor unions and American history and all that. So I just found it to be interesting and something different and more refreshing for viewers and the other judges. It relates to frontiers, although it didn't really cross a physical frontier, or it wasn't the first of its kind to form a labor strike. It helped create more fair and healthy labor unions, and it built more rights before workers and in our country.
Wonderful. And yours took first place in the regional competition,
yes.
And Preston, yours was second? Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Great. So we'll queue up your documentary on the Homestead Strike right after our video for this week. So Thank you both. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Danzer, and congratulations to all of your students who competed in this. So that's it for this week. Stay well, everyone. With Monty Pride, I'm Matt Evans.
The Homestead Strike explored the frontier of labor disputes. It showed us the importance of labor unions in factories and how they can be negatively impacted by cruel management. On November 25, 1835, the father of steel, Andrew Carnegie, was born in Dunfermline, Scotland. After moving to Allegheny, Pennsylvania as a child, Carnegie was faced with many opportunities that led him to become one of the richest men in America. Such opportunities included meeting his mentor Thomas A. Scott, becoming manager of the Keystone Bridge Company, and working on Eads Bridge in St. Louis, Missouri. The Panic of 1873 took a large toll on Carnegie and his business. With the expansion of railroads becoming unnecessary, Carnegie retracted from the railroad industry and focused on using his steel for the construction of cities like Chicago and New York City. The rapid urbanization of these cities required more homes to be built. Carnegie still allowed homes to be built quicker and more efficiently. Due to this shift, his company grew, and he set his sights on becoming the richest man in America. To keep his company orderly, Carnegie hired self-made millionaire Henry Frick to mitigate costs in the company.
Trouble's over, then I'll return to you.
In the year 1873, Carnegie bought the Homestead Mill in Homestead, Pennsylvania. His workforce consisted of 3,800 men, 750 of which were union workers. To the public, Carnegie portrayed himself as a supporter of the union. Carnegie gained the trust from many people, especially his workers. Secretly, Carnegie wasn't fond of the union, and he was eager to be rid of it. In 1890, the price of rolled steel products started to decline, dropping from $35 a gross ton to $22 in 1892. Carnegie and Frick were determined to cut wages and break the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, the nation's largest steelmaker and its largest craft union. With a 3-year contract between the Amalgamated Association and Carnegie Steel Company ending in July 1892, the Amalgamated Association and Carnegie Steel began negotiations. The company proposes a sliding scale of pay for tonnage based on the market price, along with a reduction in wage rates for skilled workers. The union objects.
While decent men were sleeping peacefully, can you wonder why all honest hearts with indignation burn? And why the worm that treads the ground when trod upon will turn when they locked out?
Frick didn't understand that the steel workers believed that the mill belonged to them. They were the ones who made the steel. You know, it was their plant. And they weren't gonna let this nasty little Frick take it from him.
In May, Carnegie travels to his hometown in Scotland and leaves Frick in charge of the mill. With his boss's support, Frick announced that he would no longer negotiate with the Amalgamated Association and initiates 12-hour working days 6 days a week. On June 29th, despite the union's willingness to negotiate, Frick closed the Homestead Mill, locking out 3,800 men. 2 days later, workers seized the mill and sealed off the town from strikebreakers. Despite the workers' efforts, Frick had constructed a 12-foot fence that wrapped around the Homestead Mill entirely. He added peepholes for rifles and barbed wire. The strikers called the fence Fort Frick. Workers had tried to reach Carnegie for support, but Carnegie wouldn't respond to his workers. Instead, he maintained contact with Frick and took his side. The strikers knew a fight was inevitable, and they began to prepare themselves with guns, barricades, and anything that could be used to fight. Unfortunately, Frick also felt the rising tension between himself and the strikers. With each day the workers were on strike, Frick feared even more that the strikers would target the scabs he planned to hire. So, he sent for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, a private police force that Carnegie had hired years before to break strikes at his other mills to eliminate the threat. Armed with Winchester rifles, the 300 Pinkerton men arrived at the mill by tugboats up the Monongahela River on July 6, 1892. When the two sides met, the strikers were given the chance to surrender, but they did not. One worker stated, "To be confronted with a gang of loafers and cutthroats from all over the country, coming there, as they thought, to take their jobs, why they naturally wanted to go down and defend their homes and their property and their lives, with force if necessary." And without warning, bullets were fired and steelworker William Foy and the captain of the Pinkertons fell wounded. Nobody knows who shot the first bullet, and after immense fire, the Pinkertons retreated to their boats. Although outnumbering the Pinkertons, strikers tossed a flaming freight train car at the boats. They also threw dynamite. Anything that they could get their hands on, they most definitely threw. And in the barges, the Pinkertons were petrified for their lives. One Pinkerton agent stated, "The noise that they made on shore was awful, and it made us shake in our boots. We were penned in like rats, and we went at the fighting like desperate wild men. All of our men were under the beds and bunks, crying and trembling." The Pinkertons raised the white flag 4 times, and each time the strikers shot it down. It wasn't until 5 p.m. that the strikers accepted the Pinkerton surrender. After the battle, 7 workers and 3 Pinkerton agents were found dead. In the town, Pinkertons were beaten and tormented while being escorted to the town's jail. That same night, the remaining Pinkertons left the town on the night train. Frick had written to Carnegie about the recent events, and Carnegie was pleased with Frick's determination and will. In a telegram to Frick, Carnegie wrote, "Cable just received. All anxiety gone, since now you stand firm. Never employ one of these rioters. Let grass grow over work." And although workers had reason to celebrate, it was short-lived. Frick was infuriated by the Pinkertons' loss. He ultimately had the Pennsylvania governor, Robert E. Patterson, bring in 8,500 troops to Homestead. And on July 12th, the troops arrived at Homestead, and with their latest weapons, they were able to take control of the mill in only 20 minutes. Homestead was put under martial law, and by August, the mill was running again and employed 1,700 scab workers.
Mr. Frick.
The aftermath of the battle was horrific. Alexander Berkman, a Union supporter, attempted to assassinate Frick, but ultimately failed. Considering his near death, Frick was even more determined to get what he desired: rid his mill of the Union. Out on the streets, strikers held riots against scabs. Many people were hurt because of these riots, and the riots were what Frick needed to rid Carnegie Steel Company of labor unions. And because of this, Carnegie was able to cut wages, eliminate more than 400 jobs, and impose 12-hour shifts. Strikers were charged with murder and other crimes, but due to the pity of the jury, all charges were dropped. Carnegie and Frick faced much backlash for their actions at Homestead. Frick was a monster, and Carnegie was the new Judas Iscariot. St. Louis Dispatch, a newspaper company, stated, "One would naturally suppose that if he had a grain of manhood, not to say courage in his composition, he would at least have been willing to face the consequences of his inconsistency. But what does Carnegie do? Runs off to Scotland out of harm's way to await the issue of the battle he was too pusillanimous to share. A single word from him might have saved the bloodshed, but the word was never spoken. Say what you will of Frick, he is a brave man. Say what you will of Carnegie, he is a coward, and gods and men hate cowards." And Frick was not treated any kinder. Reverend J.J. McLeod compared Frick to a toad, saying, "The only one of them who had little enough blood in him to carry out this awful work. There was no more sensibility in that man than in a toad." The Homestead strike explored the frontier of labor disputes. It was the reason for the Anti-Pinkerton Currents Act, a law passed in 1893 that limited the federal government's ability to hire private police forces. It revealed the monstrosity of labor norms of the time, and became a prime example as to why labor unions are a necessity in this world.